Hello and welcome to another episode of the Monday Night Wars. It is October 2nd, 1995, and this is WCW Nitro live from the Denver Coliseum in Denver, Colorado. I am Scott. With me is Joseph, and let's get right into it because they get right into it. Ric Flair invades the broadcast booth during the opening segment and cuts a promo on his opponent, Arn Anderson. We're going to see them go at it tonight. Joseph, tell me about this promo.
There's not much to say. He just lets him know that he's coming for him. It's a very quick promo. It gets a C for me. It's not Flair's best work, but it's not bad at all. It's Flair. I don't know if he's ever cut a bad promo. The one negative I will say about this is Pepe is wearing springy eyes. I don't like it. Gets a D.
I'm pretty shocked by what I just heard, to be honest with you. Shocked, and I dare say disgusted. I'm disgusted by the fact that you gave Ric Flair a C, and I'm disgusted that you didn't like those googly eyes. I enjoyed both. I mean, granted, we have established the fact that I'm probably a little biased on Ric Flair because he has had a meteoric rise in my wrestling rankings after watching WCW again, like we have been doing. You're right. It is a short promo, but I thought it was great. It's another great Ric Flair promo. He's coming for Arn, and the googly eyes were stupid, and I loved them. And I think there's going to be a lot of that tonight, where you hear that from me a lot, that something was stupid and great. But let's move on to the main event. Oh wait, it's not the main event, but it could have been. Lex Luger versus Randy Savage. It's for the number one contender shot, and also if Luger loses, he's got to leave WCW. What happens? Well, we got a ref bump. Savage hits Luger with the elbow, but there's no count. Ref's out. The Giant comes out. He lays out Savage with a choke slam. Luger wakes up from sleepy time and puts Savage in the torture rack. And the referee calls it after our favorite 3 arm drops. Luger defeats Randy Savage, and he stays with WCW, holds his number one contender title shot. It's an 8-minute even match. What do you think, Joseph?
Well, first I got to talk about what Macho Man Randy Savage is wearing. It's rainbow head to toe, and I think it is fantastic. That itself would get an A for me. The segment it gets kind of a B minus. It's a bit muddy, but I think it works really well. I don't think it's the best segment they've had. This is where Dungeon of Doom. It's like now we're kind of seeing rinse and repeat. The only difference really between last week and this week is that last week they attacked Luger. Or rather, Giant attacked Luger and gave it, gave us that, that idea that, hey, you know what? They actually are going after Luger. And Kevin Sullivan was really upset about that. So this week, they kind of make amends to that by attacking Savage when Luger's kind of knocked out. And when Luger comes to, he hits the torture rack and, he obviously wins. So the attack almost seems to help Luger. And that's really well done. I don't overly like, interferences unless they advance story. This one definitely does. So that's why it gets the B minus for me. It's not the best that they've done so far, but it works really well. The match itself is fun. I mean, Luger and Mach work really well together. Everything they've done together so far, I've enjoyed. I thought it's been a valuable, use of screen time. I'm not the biggest Lex Luger fan, but he's holding his own so far. I'm not, I don't hate what I'm seeing on the screen. How about you?
Neither of us are the biggest Lex Luger fan. And I think we have to be realistic. He's traditionally not great on the mic, and he's traditionally not the greatest in-ring worker, but he has been good so far. And, maybe that's because he's going up against some of the greatest of all time, like Randy Savage. Maybe that's what's doing it, but it was a good match. It was a good back and forth. You're right. The run-in was to advance the story. There was the ambiguity created last week by Giant attacking Lex. That seems to have been smoothed over. I think it helps. I like that we're kind of layering ambiguity on ambiguity. Is he? Isn't he? He seemingly was helped this week, but they laid him out last week and he lost. I mean, what's going on here? And I think that really helps us. And I think it helps the story, keep the story interesting. Because if you just had this kind of ongoing story where Lex is just constantly being held by the dungeon. It kind of becomes pretty obvious that he's with the dungeon, whether or not he is, but it just seems like, oh, okay, well, what's the ambiguity here? They created some ambiguity. I thought it was a good match. Again, as I mentioned on the last podcast, you talked about how WWF, what was WWF's line? It's, you never know what's going to happen or something like that.
Yeah, anything can happen in the WWF.
Anything can happen in the WWF, and how you don't really feel that way. And I completely agree with you. I don't feel that way. I do feel that way on WCW. It remains crazy to me, and I said how crazy this was last week, that this match, Lex Luger, Randy Savage for the number one contender title shot, and if Lex loses, he leaves. That's on a Monday night, and it's not even the main event. It's the first match of the night on October 2nd, 1995.
Yeah, it's great. Also, I will say, whenever Vince says that, it always sounds like he's holding in a burp. He always goes, anything could happen in the WWF. I don't know why he sounds like that every single time.
We know you don't like Vince announcer voice. Well, I don't know you don't like Vince announcer voice. I don't think you've actually told people you like Vince announcer's voice on the podcast. Maybe we'll get into that when we talk about WWF this week.
Maybe.
Moving on, though, we've got another promo for Saturday night, 6:05. Flying Brian and Arn, they're apparently a tag team now, are going to take on Dick Slater and Bunkhouse Buck. We're told that Johnny B. Bad missed his U.S. title shot against Sting. And why? We don't know. Well, DDP, who Johnny B. Bad defeated for that number one title shot, slashed Johnny B. Bad's tires. So we got a story going here, and that story's going to keep going. We're going to get some more of that. And then probably most importantly, Joseph, Hacksaw Jim Duggan's going to take on Big Bubba Rogers. That's a good Saturday night.
That's a great Saturday night.
It really is. But I don't want to talk about it that anymore, because I want to talk about the most important event of the night. I want to talk about the event tonight that moved the needle, changed the game. This is where you can say, if you're looking at your historiography of WCW WWF, you can say this is the moment in time that put WCW on top. We have Disco Inferno showing up to dance. Joseph, what do you think about this?
Just kill me now. You're going to hype it up every time, and it's worse and worse. The only thing that's good about this is Eddie Guerrero comes out, and then Dean Malenko, and then they have a match. That's the only thing that's good about it. They almost like stop his music, get him out of there. We're going to have our match now.
Man, look at that tuck and roll into the next segment, because you're right. We do have a match. We got Eddie Guerrero versus Dean Malenko. Great match, although kind of spoiled because we go split screen for the arrival of Hulk Hogan. Jimmy Hart's telling him he shouldn't go in, and nothing, it's going to be bad. His neck's still bad, all of that. Eddie Guerrero defeats Dean Malenko. It's a 5-minute, 29-second match. Malenko wants a rematch after and shakes Eddie Guerrero's hand. Good guy, Eddie Guerrero. What do you think about this?
Yeah, I think the whole segment gets a B from me. I can't rate it any higher than that. I'm sure one of our 6, listeners is going to go, but it's Eddie Guerrero and Dean Malenko, and they're going to do their Vince McMahon voice. But I think you can't grade it higher because of the weird split screen. Paying attention to what Hulk Hogan's doing. I really think so. At the onset of this show, they do a very long recap of the previous week, and WCW does this a lot, where it's like a recap that's almost the entire episode of a previous week or pay-per-view. And it's frustrating because if they condensed that, they could have done this split screen at the front of the show, had a moment that made sense for that, and given this match the time and on-screen segment to really breathe. But they don't, and that's unfortunate. Now, that being said, could these two have a bad match together? That's a completely rhetorical question. No, they cannot have a bad match together. This is more Eduardo Guerrero than it is Eddie Guerrero, because this version does not lie, cheat, or steal. He has zero Latino heat, but he's still great. It's a fun match. I love the ending of it, where they do the Dean Malenko says he wants a rematch, and Eduardo Guerrero says anytime, brother, or something like that, and they shake hands. That's pretty nice. Also, this is a little thing I noticed during this particular match, which is that 90s Hulkster cosplayers are the best, and they come in all shapes and sizes. And if I do the video version, hopefully I'll be able to find some of them and pop them in here at this point, because there is a lot of them in this match, and it's great.
That is something you and I truly enjoy, is the Hulkamaniacs running wild in the audience, because it is kind of fascinating. I mean, Hulk Hogan, he was the biggest guy in the game. You know, honestly, he might be the biggest guy in the game still ever. Like, if you stop someone on the street and say, name a wrestler, probably still to this day, they're going to say Hulk Hogan. And it is kind of fascinating looking into the crowd, just how he crosses kind of all demographics. You know, you think the little Hulkamaniacs are kids, but they're fully grown adults in their shredded Hulk Hogan t-shirts, and it's pretty wild. But going back to the match, you're right. Eddie Guerrero, Dean Malenko have never done a bad match. This is not a bad match. It's a great match, actually, and they're going to do it a dozen more times, and I'm going to love it every time. It is really spoiled, though, by this split screen that we don't really need, because we've already been told countless times that Hulk Hogan's coming. He's going to be in the building. I guess we need it for the Jimmy Hart foreshadowing, but we're not dumb. I feel like we know, something's going to happen. Hulk Hogan is in the building, and the Dungeon's out to destroy Hulkamania. So I didn't think it was needed. It kind of ruined it for me. But overall, it's an Eddie Guerrero Dean Malenko match, so I can't give it a bad grade. I'm going to give it a B. After that, though, we have the promo that's everyone is talking about. Again, we didn't need it because we immediately go to the promo with Hulk Hogan and Mean Gene. He still has the neck brace on. Hulk talks about how what really kept him going was a fan waiting for a double lung transplant that gave him the courage to keep going. He gets out of the ring. He's giving fans high fives, but this old lady throws powder in his face. Wait, it's not an old lady. It's Kevin Sullivan, the Taskmaster, dressed like an old lady. Giant and Zodiac come out. Hogan gets beat up. And then, Joseph, and an earth-shattering development. And this doesn't involve Disco Inferno, which you'll be surprised to find out. Earth-shattering development. A tragedy occurs. They shave the Hulkster's mustache. The Nasty Boys run out to try and help. I don't know why, because we haven't established that there's a connection between them and Hulk Hogan. They are friends in real life, but I don't think we've ever seen that on camera. They get it handed to them. Tell me about it, Joseph. Tell me about this tragedy that we witnessed.
All right, so I'm going to kind of bounce around here because there's a lot to unpack on this. First off, Hogan's wearing what is my favorite outfit of his in WCW. Just this particular of the red and yellows. Obviously, the NWO stuff's really cool too, but I think the long red tights with the yellow stripe down that says Hulkster on this, I think it's great. And usually he gets cowboy boots and stuff, and it's fantastic. Obviously you mentioned him getting attacked and all that. I want to real quickly comment on the little Hulkster who is having a double lung replacement or whatever. So Hulk Hogan often gets referred to as the Babe Ruth of wrestling. And I don't disagree with that. I'm not going to say anything negative on that. However, what I will say is the truth of that is that if you look at Babe Ruth, and obviously Babe Ruth is a phenomenal baseball player. Historically, one of the greatest. I don't think he's the greatest. That's a whole different tangent to go down. But he does this thing, or not he does, but there's this thing surrounding Babe Ruth where there's a lot of myths about him, where people will say, his pregame meal was this, and it's like, that really wasn't what it was. Or, one time he hit a ball so high that by the time it dropped, he had rounded the bases, so it counted as a home run. They'll just make up things. There's myths surrounding him all the time. This kid told him on his dying wish was for Babe to hit a home run for him that day, and he went out and he did. Lots of things like that. Hulk Hogan is so similar, except for the difference is reporters did that for Babe Ruth. Hulk Hogan does that for Hulk Hogan. And this is another one of those things where it's like, I don't think that conversation ever took place. It's ridiculous. It's over the top. It's hilarious. Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. And then if this segment couldn't get more ridiculous, and this segment gets a D for me because it's awful, they shave Hogan's mustache, which I'm pretty sure was for like a role or something like that, like some sort of movie role, which Hogan's been in one good movie ever that I can think of. And people would go, "Oh, you're going to say No Holds Barred, right?" No, that's trash. It's Muppets from Space. It's the only movie he's ever been in that was good. There was no need for him to shave his mustache. He's not a good actor. It doesn't work. And to your point, it's a travesty.
So I have to say, this segment is by far the stupidest thing we have seen yet in our watching of WCW. And I loved every minute of it and will not stand for an unkind word said about it.
Our six listeners are going to have no idea which direction to go after this.
Because this is great. This is wrestling at its finest. You know, it's funny. Last week, you mentioned, you gave me a little ribbing about how early on I said, I'm kind of tired of Hulk Hogan. I'm tired of Hulkamania, but then I've liked every single segment he's been in. And I think to clarify what I mean by that is it's really his matches. I'm talking about his matches. His matches are just completely formulaic. They're the same thing every time. You know, oh gosh, is Hogan going to lose? No, he hulks out and he hits him with the leg drop and he wins. Or he doesn't lose, or he loses, but he doesn't lose clean. So he doesn't lose the title. It's the same thing every time. I get tired of it. I do enjoy still, and I will always enjoy just the nonsense of Hulkamania. And this is just an absolute masterclass on just stupidity. It is ridiculous that he was talking with a Hulkamaniac waiting on a double lung transplant, and Kevin Sullivan in drag in the audience throwing dust in his eyes and then shaving his mustache. It was start to finish ridiculous, and I loved it.
I love you, man. I love watching you get enjoyment about these things.
It's nonsense. It's nonsense.
Yeah, 100%.
And it was great. I laughed the whole time. And honestly, if I'm laughing, it's good wrestling. That's what I care about. I care about having a good time. And that's what happened here. Now, if you thought that couldn't be topped, though, we got a Ric Flair Arn Anderson matchup next. So we got Ric Flair, Arn Anderson at it again. We have the O.J. Simpson verdict in. So you got to tune into Ted Turner's CNN to find out what's going on there. But ultimately, Flair applies the figure 4. Flying Brian runs in and hits Flair with a splash, gets the DQ. Flair defeats Arn by DQ. 8-minute, 17-second match. Flair starts going at Pillman. Arn recovers, gets up, takes Flair down, and then they give him the beatdown. What do you think, Joseph?
I think it's fantastic. It's a B for me because it's just not I don't think it's a long enough match to get an A. But that's in no way disrespectful. I think a B is something I really want to see on TV. Flair and Anderson had just phenomenal chemistry. I love the ending of this match. You know, when you hit a figure 4, you are essentially defenseless. You know, if you're the one applying the lock and if you're the one receiving a lock. But in this case, they're using it against Flair, who, there's no way you can just get out of the figure 4 quickly. So Pillman hits the diving elbow and gets the DQ for Flair to win. I think it's a great segment. It's just pushing the storyline further. It's going to give Flair more fuel as to why he's going to want this tag team match, because he can't just have a clean match against Arn Anderson. He wants just a one-on-one, nobody here. And yet Pillman just won't stop interfering. And I love it. I think it's great.
Well, after that, I guess I should tell you, I'm trying to move on because I'm the time master. I'm trying to keep time, but I haven't even told people how I feel about this. I don't think people will be shocked to find out that I liked this match. It's Ric Flair. It's Arn Anderson. As we've talked about before, I don't really understand this rivalry. I don't know what started it. Obviously, they've told us, Arn's become a boring family man. Rick's lost his touch since Hogan showed up. Okay, it seems that it was put together very hastily. It would be very interesting to find out why they did this. Maybe there was a reason, but I kind of don't care at this point. And I think we've said this before. I don't really care anymore what the reason was. We keep getting Ric Flair, Arn Anderson matches, and they're great. These guys know each other so well. The chemistry is so good. They're just great matches every time. And I'm fine with seeing more of them. And we're going to see more of them because now we're told that next week, Ric Flair and Arn Anderson are going to go at it in a steel cage. We're also told that Sting is going to take on Shark. Sabu is going to go after Mr. JL. Road Warrior against Big Bubba Rogers. And we're doing it live from Chicago. Joseph, what do you think on the close here?
Not much to say. I think it's just a nice setup. I do like, the continuation of the Flair and Anderson stuff. I think overall it's fine.
I agree. It's so fine. It's like an aged wine. So let's keep going. Let's uncork that bottle, Joseph. What a segue that was
That was horrible.
to WWF Raw, October 2nd, 1995, at the Grand Center in Grand Rapids, Michigan. We are in the same city, but at a different venue, Joseph.
Yeah, so it's it's another venue where, again, this is like the third, maybe fourth week in a row. It's about half capacity, and it's last week we noticed that WWF in the Nielsen ratings only had a 1.9. So that's again pretty telling. They're not in a good spot, and I don't know if they realize it yet, but they really are not in a good spot.
Yeah, it'll be fascinating to see as we watch if there comes a time where they take notice and it becomes clear in watching. But I don't feel like we're there yet. But yeah, they did lose last week. We'll see about this week. But to start off with, we got a Razor Ramon 1-2-3 kid match. I'll let you break it down for us. But important note: Dean Douglas shows up again to take some notes. What do you think about it?
Yeah, so this is a segment that I think the idea is sound. I think the execution is flawed. So basically, this is a pretty long match because what ends up happening is Razor Ramon will beat 1-2-3 Kid one way. The first way, I believe, is with the lariat. He beats him with the lariat, and then Razor is not really celebrating, but like, hey, raise my hand, kind of thing. And 1-2-3 Kid gets back up, and he wants to start fighting as if to restart the match. And during commercial, they end up restarting the match, and Razor wins again with the power bomb. And then Kid again wants a restart. And they do this a number of times. Razor eventually wins with a small package. And they're doing this almost to show the resiliency of 1-2-3 Kid. I think the segment would work a lot better because it gets a C for me. I think it would work a lot better if 1-2-3 Kid really was a very clear-cut face. They've been doing this thing where is he good? Is he bad? Is he turning? Is he working with Dean? We don't know. And we don't really know what his position is in the company. They do something similar as far as the kind of, come back at me, I'm still standing routine many years later with Jeff Hardy and The Undertaker. And that works so well because Jeff Hardy is so clearly the underdog face. And Undertaker is also a face, but he is so clearly the person who is supposed to go over, in the match. And that works. And it ends with Jeff Hardy getting his hand raised by Taker and kind of a pat on the head. And you could do something similar, but it just doesn't really, it doesn't click in this match. I think it's a good idea. I think it's poorly executed. Overall, it gets a C.
Razor Ramon, 1-2-3 Kid, both good wrestlers, wrestled a good match. But you're right, the restarting it over and over again, while I like the idea of it, I like the premise, and as you said, it's been used to great effect other times, I don't feel like it works here. Because is 1-2-3 Kid a face? He's kind of been making his heel turn for the past couple of weeks, right?
Yeah, and that's what makes it so confusing.
Yeah, so why do we care that the heel got beat? If 1-2-3 Kid was still a face, if this was still because the whole premise of this was that this rivalry is that 1-2-3 Kid looks up to Razor, and Razor's kind of rejected him, kind of ignored him. 1-2-3 Kid's tried to help him a couple times. It hasn't worked. Razor Ramon's just said, keep away from me, kid. He's heartbroken. His idol has rejected him, and he's upset about it. That's the premise, but he's a bad guy now. So why do I care?
Yeah, it would almost make more sense if Razor was a bad guy, and if this was a face turn for Razor, almost accepting the 1-2-3 Kid, which is kind of what they did the first time they had a match. So it's like they're trying to repeat it, and it doesn't. That you've covered it too many times. It doesn't work anymore.
After that, we have a promo, and this promo is very important. We got an O.J. Simpson vote line. The O.J. Simpson trial is occurring at this point in American history. It's going on right now. I think actually this is the day the jury reached a verdict, but we won't get the verdict until tomorrow. They held the verdict overnight because there was concerns about, if he was convicted, that there might be rioting. We're not too far removed from the LA riots. There was real concern that if he was convicted, there would be rioting. So I think they wanted to give some time for the police to prepare for the potential rioting. And as a result, they held the verdict overnight. So we don't know what the verdict is. We know they've come to a verdict. And so what does WWF do? We put up a vote line to see how the fans feel about the O.J. Simpson trial. The proceeds are supposedly going to the National Exchange Club Foundation for the Prevention of Child Abuse. According to Dave Meltzer, and so take it with a grain of salt, but according to Dave Meltzer, and I think this is possible. I mean, you could just call these people and ask them. They didn't know that there was going to be a vote line with proceeds going to them on WWF. Apparently, Vince didn't ask permission, and they weren't too thrilled about the fact that their organization was being associated with a brutal double murder. But here we are, Joseph. What do you think about this?
This is incredibly ridiculous. Also, these are all pre-taped, so there's no way that fans can vote and actually get this information in. I don't know how they would have pulled this off. So it's ridiculous, and there's gonna be a conclusion at the end. We'll talk about it then. It's over the top. Can't stand it.
Yeah, and this is we've kind of started with the OJ stuff. We've had the Johnny Cochran like character in Clarence Mason, but they're gonna go so much further and go so too far with this going forward. But both companies, although I feel like WCW is a little less overt about it. They make references, but it's a little less overt, although it's very clear what they're doing. Where WWF is just like taking the OJ thing and running with it. And we're going to see a lot more of this. But tonight we got a vote line. Is he guilty or not? We'll find out later when the fans call in for this pre-tape show that they're absolutely not calling in for. But going on, we have a match. We have Hunter Hearst Helmsley and Barry Horowitz. Vince and Jerry spend the entire match talking about OJ. Hunter Hearst Helmsley defeats Barry Horowitz. It's a 5-minute, 35-second match. Tell me about it, Joseph.
Yeah, so, Barry Horowitz, essentially, his gimmick in this is, get it, he's a Jew. That's essentially the gimmick. It's one of those, like, playfully anti-Semitic ideas. It's not great. It does not age well. Barry Horowitz, the wrestler, is very talented. He's in ring. He's very good. He does a good job. He's always kind of a jobber. He does a very good job of always putting over his opponents. But it's a weird gimmick. Now, Hunter Hearst Helmsley, on the other hand, actually has a bit of a backstory going into this. He was recently working with WCW. He was under the gimmick Paul Levesque, which is his actual name. And he was a French aristocrat working with Steven Regal, Lord Steven Regal. And they were like, oh, because your last name's French, you should be able to do a French accent. And he would do a French accent. And it was horrible. But the wrestler is very talented. And he would ultimately get released by WCW. According to Eric Bischoff, it was a cost-saving move. Apparently, they were trying to keep only local talent due to not being able to pay for flights. That was his reasoning. But, this is Eric Bischoff talking. I think Triple H or Hunter Hearst Helmsley has disputed that in many recent years. There's a rumor that he really wanted to do solo work. There's a rumor that he was working his way to WWF the whole time. So it's up in the air. It doesn't matter. But he would end up getting released. He did begin his career working and getting trained by a legendary wrestler named Killer Kowalski, Polish-Canadian heel wrestler. He trained him, and he originally would go under the name Terra Rising. That was his initial gimmick. Like I said, he'd go to WCW, he spent a little bit of time there, and then he would come here to WWF. Now, this is not a needle-moving move. This is not something that you would look at and go, that's the moment that WWF started excelling, because he wasn't really anybody. I mean, he was just a competent in-ring worker. He will become somebody, but that's not really what was going on here. Now, this match itself starts off in what I think is an incredibly creative way, where Vince McMahon says over the commentary, can Horowitz defeat Hunter Hearst Helmsley? And then it cuts to Hunter Hearst Helmsley backstage, and he looks straight into the camera almost to reply and says, fat chance. And then he goes out to his entrance. It's a really cool way to start a match. I don't recall them really ever doing this ever again. It's super cool. And I really wish they would do that. I wish that was part of his gimmick. It's not. So as Hunter Hearst Helmsley, he's essentially still an aristocrat. He's still this, upper class gimmick, but he's not French this time because they had the wherewithal to go, hey, you should not do a French accent. But he is essentially the same gimmick. This is kind of the Blue Bloods here in WWF, but he's going solo. I love it. I think it's fantastic. I love everything he does. I like, the little bow he does. I like his, over the top, classical music. I think it's great. The match is pretty quick. It's not quick, but it's pretty simple. It's a good back and forth. Barry Horowitz is doing a very good job putting him over, and Hunter Hearst Helmsley wins with the pedigree, named the pedigree because of his, quote unquote pedigree, his upperclassness. Overall, it gets a C plus. Only a C plus because it is essentially a squash match, but it's very well done.
I'm going to disagree with you on this one because I liked this match. And I guess I will agree that the Barry Horowitz gimmick is not good. You're right. The gimmick is that he is Jewish. That's the entirety of the gimmick. I think he's a good wrestler, and I think it's a shame that they didn't do something better with him. But I like this match because, it seems clear from the start that Hunter Hearst Helmsley is going to defeat Barry Horowitz, right? If you're looking at this match and you're guessing the outcomes, that seems clear. And while he ultimately does, the back and forth is so good in this match that I wasn't sure. There came a point where I was like, "Oh my God, are they actually going to let Barry Horowitz go over on Hunter Hearst Helmsley, who at this point they're pushing real hard?" I was like, "Wow, is this actually going to happen? Are they putting Barry Horowitz over on Triple H, Hunter Hearst Helmsley, with who's getting a push?" No, but I thought they might. So, and for that, I give it a B. I thought it was good in that regard. It kept me guessing. I thought it was a good match. After that, we have another match. This one is PG-13, JC Ice and Wolfie D versus Al Brown and Sonny Rogers. PG-13 defeats Al Brown and Sonny Rogers 3 minutes, 44 seconds. Tell me about this one, Joseph.
So PG-13, notoriously one of your favorite tag teams. They started in USWA, which I believe is the United States Wrestling Alliance. Their gimmick essentially is that they are white rappers. I think it's kind of a play on maybe like the Beastie Boys or something like that. It's not good. I will give them credit where credit is due. And that is that they're kind of a few years ahead of their time. Because in a few years, you're going to have things like the New Age Outlaws and Road Dogg Jesse James, kind of having this almost like white rapper gimmick. You'll have Too Cool, who are kind of white hip hop boys, very much like Jamie Kennedy and I don't remember what that movie's called. Someone will remember and they'll let me know. But it's like the only famous Jamie Kennedy film. So there you go.
Malibu's
Most Wanted, right?
Yes.
That's what it is. Yeah. Okay.
Teamwork.
There you go. But it's kind of what the idea is, but they're just a few years ahead of what they're supposed to, or of where this would work. That being said, it doesn't work. So I gave the segment a C because it's just a squash match. I probably could have graded it worse. I don't care about the segment. In fact, it makes the previous segment way better. So I'll agree with you on the previous segment. I think the previous segment gets a B if this gets a C because this is not great.
Yeah, the wrestling in it is fine. It's clearly a squash match. Al Brown, Sonny Rogers, jobbers. But PG-13 is, I could not suspend disbelief. You're right. They look like, I think they're trying to be like gangsters. And in fact, we're told that they're gangsters. They're from the mean streets. They're rough and tumblers. Jerry talks the whole time about how they're dangerous and all these kind of things. But they look like Vanilla Ice, Jamie Kennedy, Malibu Most Wanted wannabes. I don't feel scared at any point over these two, nor think that they're dangerous. So I just couldn't get into this match. And maybe hindsight's 2020. Maybe in 1995, this was how gangsters dressed. I don't remember that being the case. Granted, I wasn't around a ton of gangsters, but I did watch TV, and people portrayed gangsters, and they did not dress like this. And the thing is, I don't feel like they're in on the joke. Obviously, you could make a comparison here to, Too Cool and their outfits, but I feel like they were in on the joke. They knew what they were doing. They knew this was funny. They knew they were having fun. I think these guys are supposed to be tough guys, and I just don't feel that way about them at all. After that, though, we get the main event with Bret Hart and Jean-Pierre Lafitte. Pretty good, huh? That's a little French for you, ladies and gentlemen. Well, French Canadian.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Thank you. I think Jean-Pierre's last name is supposed to sound like Lafitte, like he's a thief, which plays into the fact that he's stealing. The reason this match has occurred is because, well, this is a rematch from In Your House, and the reason that match occurred is because Jean-Pierre has been stealing. Bret Hart gives his iconic sunglasses to kids in the audience. He's been stealing them off the kids. He stole Bret Hart's leather, iconic leather jacket. Jean-Pierre's a thief. He's also apparently a pirate because he's got an eye patch, which he really does actually need an eye patch. So I guess they're just like, you got an eye patch, you're a pirate. But he's also La Thief. Jerry Lawler throughout the match laughs maniacally because Bret's getting beat up. It looks like Bret's going to lose this. But Bret ends up getting Jean-Pierre in the sharpshooter. He wins it. Bret Hart defeats Jean-Pierre Lafitte. 13-minute flat match. What did you think, Joseph?
I thought the match itself was pretty good. I think Bret Hart is very hot with the crowd, at least in this night. They really enjoyed seeing him come out. I think the two men put on a very good match. I think that there's a scoop slam into the steel steps that was really, really like almost difficult to watch. It was very well done, but also like, God, that probably hurt. There's a superplex. I love superplexes anytime they're executed. Bret Hart would end up winning this match with the Scorpion Deathlock. And that's important to note. And I can't wait to get emails on that. You had to do it. Yeah, it had to be done. Eventually, he wins the match. Jerry Lawler and Bret Hart start kind of going at it. Jerry Lawler instigates it, though he says he didn't. And then they start going at it. And then your boy, Dr. Isaac Yankem, attacks Bret Hart. And this sets up a cage match in a few weeks. I think the segment gets a B-, and the B- is for the match. The match is very good. I think the match is very well done between the two competitors. I think everything that happens after the match I could do without, and I don't like it.
Both guys in this match are good. I mean, Bret Hart obviously is one of the best technical wrestlers ever. Jean-Pierre is also a good wrestler. It's fine. It's a well-wrestled match. For the record, I called it the sharpshooter, so do not send your powder-laced packages to me. Send them to Joseph. The match was fine. The aftermath was, yes, it was unnecessary. We have Jerry Lawler continuing to mouth off at Bret. He wants to fight Bret. Bret's ready to fight. He's good with it. He throws Jerry over the guardrail. Isaac Yankem shows up, saves Jerry, gives Bret the DDS, which is just a DDT. When we come back from the commercial, we find out Gorilla Monsoon, who's been watching the show from home. We've been told throughout the night that Gorilla's at home. He's watching the show from home, but apparently he's called in, and he's telling us that Bret and Yankem gonna be in a cage match. How exciting!
Yeah, and the weird thing to me too is that Jerry Lawler and Bret Hart have been feuding off and on since 1993. It was old then. Why are we still doing this?
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. I mean, Bret Hart is one of their top talents. I know you have feelings about Bret Hart, but I don't think it's crazy to say that Bret Hart is, at least in the minds of most wrestling fans, and especially wrestling fans at this point, Bret Hart is up there with Shawn Michaels. He's up there with Diesel. He's one of their top tier talents. Oh, I heard that mic click on. Joseph, go ahead.
No, I was going to agree with you 100%. I mean, he's arguably their biggest name right now. You can't dispute that. Whether I like him or not has nothing to do with the reality that he is one of the guys right now.
And he's wrestling mid-carders. I think Jean-Pierre Lafitte is a fine wrestler, and he wrestles a fine match, but he's a mid-carder. He is not top tier talent. And next he's wrestling Isaac Yankem, a mid-carder. and he's feuding with Jerry Lawler, who hasn't been relevant in 10 years. It's just insane booking to me.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. I don't like it. Let's timekeeper. Let's move on.
All right. We've got more important information here. This is probably the most important information. So next week we're going to have a 6-man tag match. It's going to be The Undertaker, Shawn Michaels, and Diesel versus Bulldog, Yokozuna, Owen Hart. But here it is, Joseph, what you've all been waiting for, the outcome of the O.J. Simpson vote line. 51% of fans think OJ is not guilty.
Again, how do you come by these numbers when you're recording ahead of time? Makes no sense. Unless the only way it could make no, because it's a phone in. It's a phone in. If it was a fan vote based off of attendance, I could understand it. But it's a phone line vote, and you're not doing this live. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, well, I guess, do we know it's not live? I mean, we know it's not live, but do the fans know it's not live? Because there's been a number of times where they claim they're live and they're not.
Yeah, I don't know if the fans know. I think you'd have to. I would say some fans do, right? I think the layman fan probably wouldn't. The average fan who just tunes in because they enjoy it probably wouldn't. They probably believe it's live. You'd have to be one of the neckbeards who gets all the pro wrestling magazines and looks up online and everything and watches both, records one and watches the other and then goes back and watches WCW or whatever. You'd have to really kind of do your research at this time because it's 1995. So WCW likes to let everybody know that it's not live, but unless you're watching both or doing other research, I don't know if you would know that at this point.
Yeah, I guess if you're going to shows, it's taped because you went to the show 3 weeks ago,
right?
And now you're watching that what you saw 3 weeks ago on TV, quote unquote, live. But yeah, and they do this. Well, I think this is the only so far it's the only vote line we've seen where people are actually having an effect on the outcome, right? They have tip lines and those sorts of things that don't really need to be live, but this one in theory needs to be live, right? We're supposedly taking your votes, but this was recorded 2-3 weeks ago.
Yeah, who knows, man? Who knows?
It's crazy. It's crazy. Well, that is the end, though. So let's talk about, unless you have more thoughts about anything in the close, my guess is no. Who won? Who was better this week?
I think overall Raw was kind of like a C show. I didn't think it was great. I thought they did such a great job last week. And I think this week was just like it was a lot to get through watching this. I think WCW won this week.
I cannot agree more. I've already talked about it before, but just the card on WCW this week. We have Lex Luger versus Randy Savage for the number 1 contender title shot. And if Lex loses, he has to leave WCW. That's a pay-per-view main event, and it's our first match of the night. We have Eddie Guerrero and Dean Malenko, which maybe not, obviously are not the big names that we know them to be now, but they do not put on a bad match. And then to end the night with Ric Flair versus Arn Anderson. Again, a main event pay-per-view match, Monday Night Nitro. We start the night with a pay-per-view main event. We end the night with a pay-per-view main event. And we're told next week we're going to have another pay-per-view main event with Arn and Flair going at it in a cage match. We've said it before, WCW likes to claim, or WWF likes to claim that you don't know, you never know what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen on WCW. They're putting on insane matches on just an average Monday night. There's no reason to do these 2 main events tonight. This isn't a special event night or anything like that. It's just a Monday night.
Yeah, it's bananas. WWF really is kind of rudderless at this point, and WCW is firing all cylinders.
Well, that's what we think. We think WCW won the night, but what do the fans think, Joseph? What was the Nielsen for WWF Raw?
Nielsen was a lot higher than last week. Last week was a 1.9. This week is a 2.5.
And that's crazy to me because tonight WCW Nitro also got a Nielsen of 2.5. So they tied tonight.
Yeah, that's insane. It's a draw. And, last week Raw got their, asses handed to them basically. And they were so much stronger last week.
Yeah, you thought they won last week.
Yeah.
And while the Nielsen's they got blown out of the water, and this week they tied, and it was just a middling night for WWF and just an absolute banger of a night for WCW.
I do wonder if the putting Savage and this is something I don't think we can get answered, but putting Savage and Luger at the beginning of your night hurt them, because that was the thing that they were advertising for. But if you tune into WCW, you could see that right off the bat, and then just flip the station and go to Raw.
Yeah, it was sold the week before. That was sold as their main event for tonight, and it didn't end up being their main event. It ended up being their first match tonight. So maybe people tuned in, they saw the match and said, "I'll go see what WWF is doing now."
Could be. Who knows?
Maybe, but like I said, you got two main events. You know, WrestleMania claimed to have two main events, and you strongly disagree. October 2nd, 1995, Nitro had two main events.
Yes, 100%.
Well, that's it for us. You know, once again, I'm Scott. With me is Joseph. Thank you for tuning in for another episode of the Monday Night Wars. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye, everybody. It's like, someone defacing the Declaration of Independence, and which honestly was pretty anti-minority. So that's 100% up Hogan's alley anyways. You thought I wasn't going to hit that joke. I'm still hitting that joke. This is a bad segment.
No one will ever hear that joke.
They're going to hear that joke.